Howdy ho there, mathletes. This is Mr. Stock Money. We're going to go over the midpoint formula. We're on page 15 in the green Unit 5 notes packet. So we've talked about midpoint a bunch of times in triangle proofs, stuff like that. So here we go. Midpoints. We're going to try and figure out what does that mean. So if we were given right here that CD bisects AB, the word after it's what's being cut into two equal pieces. It says based on the information, what do we know? So M is the midpoint of AB. We don't know anything about CD, okay, because a bisector splits the segment into two congruent parts, okay, and that's at M, which has to be its midpoint. So which two segments must have the same length based on this? So AM must be congruent to MB. Okay, so that's just a little review. If we go to this problem down here, they give us some coordinates, and they want us to use the distance formula to prove this. So if P is the midpoint, then that would split MP to be congruent to NP or PN, okay? So if I find the distance of MP, remember distance formula is we subtract the x's, square it, added to subtracting the y's, okay? This came from the Pythagorean theorem. So for M to P, if I subtract the x's and then subtract the y's, make sure we're doing it in the same order. So if I start with 10 for the x, we got to start with 9, okay? And if I just type this part in my calculator, because we don't know what's in the radical, so 10 minus 2 squared plus 9 minus 3 squared. This one gives us 100, okay? So if it's 100, square root of 100 would be 10, all right? So I want you to try and pause the video and see if you can do the distance formula for N to P. Okay, so right now, they both equal 10. So that means that this has to be the midpoint because it's split into two equal pieces of 10. And exercise 3 tells us to average the x coordinates and average the y coordinates together. So if this is my x1, y1, this is my x2, y2. If I average the x's, average means add them together and divide by how many there are. 2 plus 18 is 20. 20 divided by 2 gives me 10. And then if I average the y's, add them together, divide by how many are. 18 divided by 2 ends up being 9. And if there's anything special about this, what do you notice about these averages? Okay, point P right here was 10, 9. Okay, so by averaging the exponents, this gives me the coordinates of the midpoint. So if you want to try and remember midpoint and average, that would be pretty helpful. Okay, so here is our formula. Just like we've done with slope and distance, you label your points x1, y1, x2, y2, and then I find the averages of them. So as I'm done, like this is going to give me one coordinate, that's going to give me the other coordinate. So first, add my x's together. Second, add my y's together. If you're going to try and do it all at the same time in your calculator, I would suggest doing alpha y equals enter. So -5 plus 9 is 4, divided by 2 is 2. 7 plus 15 is 22, divided by 2 is 11. So that would be its midpoint. I'd like you to pause the video and try B. So if you tried these, this would have given you negative 3 over 2. And this would have given you 16 over 2, which is 8. We would also accept 1.5 and 8. Okay, but midpoint formula, we got to remember that that's just averages to find the middle. Okay, so if I'm given a graph, there is another way that I could do this. So if I counted the slope of it and cut the slope in half of the slope should get me to the middle and then back to the endpoint. So I'll kind of show us how to do that. So they want us to find the coordinates of M and mark it on the graph. So add the X's together, add the Y's together. 2 over 2 would be 1, 4 over 2 would be 2. So if I go to 1, 2, that should be my midpoint right there. Okay, and if you notice, like my whole slope here to here, I would have to go up 10 and over. So going up 10 and over 4, if I cut that in half, I would go up 5 and over 2. So up 5 over 2 lands me at my midpoint. Up 5 over 2 gets me to the other end. Okay, so my slope in simplest form would be 5 halves as well. And then the last thing that we could do is if we wanted a perpendicular bisector, bisector has to go through the midpoint. So that's what we found at M. And perpendicular needs to be the opposite or the negative reciprocal of our slope. Okay, so I could either go point slope form with the midpoint, or I could try and determine where is the y-intercept. But I'm going to go point slope form. So M's coordinates are my x1 and y1. And then the slope has to be the opposite reciprocal. So since this is positive 5 halves, this is negative, and flip it over, 2/5. Okay. If I was to try and go through and find the y-intercept, I could distribute this. Okay. But from here, if I go down 2 over 5, down 2 over 5, or up 2 and to the left 5, and then these should line up. Okay, so that's our perpendicular bisector. They did want me to try and pick a point and show you kind of lengths. The main thing that we should observe is that any point on the perpendicular bisector is equidistant to the endpoints of our segment. So in this case, it would be equidistant to A and B. So if you did that and found the distance, you would try and make that happen. All right, so considering this might be my last video for everybody, I think I have one more exciting little event for us. So feel free to let me know how it goes. My last remix, you may notice this, but we're gonna give it a shot. All right, bear with me. Stock money. Midpoint formula. If I had the segment AB and the coordinates of A and B, thought I could graph it and find the midpoint T. Usually math comes to me so very easily. All of these formulas to remember in coordinate geometry. I reviewed slope from last year in Algebra 1. Now there is distance from the Pythagorean theorem. Midpoint splits the segment into congruent parts. Average accordance is where you want to start. Every night and every day, I try to make math stay, but your midpoint formula, average x is average y is find the midpoint. This is where the segment bisector would intersect or go through the segment. Midpoint formula, your midpoint formula, la la la. So I hope you enjoyed that today. And for one last time, possibly, stock money out.